Good evening and welcome to NTD UK News. I'm Stuart Lees. Tonight's top story. Climate change policies climb higher on the agenda of world leaders, but concerns rise over how open debate will be after Google bans ads that contradict what they call the well-established scientific consensus. Also tonight, Norway's new centre-left government announces plans to continue oil and gas exploration, with any transition to green energy being gradual. And the Great Brexit brawl enters its next round. The EU offers concessions to improve trade in Northern Ireland, but the UK insists on another change to the Brexit deal. Concerns that Google is closing down scientific debate after the firm announced a ban on ads that contradict what they call the well-established scientific consensus on climate change. While Facebook hasn't announced a similar policy, the tech giant launched a so-called Climate Science Centre last year, which is now expanded to 16 countries. Here's NTD's Jane Well with more.
Climate change is high on the agenda of policymakers, but recent moves from Google to ban what they call inaccurate climate change content raises concerns that climate change policies aren't being scrutinised enough.
Clearly, we're being told there's very good evidence that there is a problem called climate change. But the point that we should have a good conversation about is what to do about it. And many of the people who are going to censor the science bit would actually also like to censor the policy bit. And that's where it gets dangerous. If you're only allowed to say, renewables are good, renewables are the solution, this is the end of the world and we need to throw everything at it, when indeed renewables are often not the solution and this is not the end of the world but a problem. And if we can't have that conversation, we'll end up both more poorly informed, but also actually ending up wasting way too many resources on bad policies.
Using figures from a study in the medical journal The Lancet, Lomberg recently calculated temperature-related deaths went down by 166,000 between the years 2000 and 2019. Some of his posts, including an op-ed on the topic published in the Wall Street Journal called "Climate Change Saves More Lives Than You'd Think," and in the New York Post, were flagged on Facebook by a climate change fact-checking website called Climate Feedback. The Sun took down the op-ed and instead had a statement from a co-author of the Lancet study who said, "Climate change does not influence temperature-related mortality, but also has other direct and indirect impacts."
It doesn't fit the narrative. So these guys basically said, that's wrong, and therefore they try to get Facebook to censor it. And it's actually succeeded in getting rid of much of this information simply by placing a sticker on it and saying, this is not correct. This is incorrect information. And of course, what they're basically saying is, we don't like it.
Facebook and the Climate Feedback site didn't come back to us with a comment. In a world where fact-checkers often dominate what we see on social media, and with the COP26 climate summit coming up, it raises the question, how open is the scientific debate? Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
Freight train operators say they have stopped using electric trains temporarily and are switching back to diesel locomotives due to soaring energy prices. The Rail Freight Group, or RFG, says electricity has tripled in price. They said the current significant increase in the wholesale cost of electricity for haulage means that some operators have had to take the regrettable decision to temporarily move back to diesel locomotives. Even with this change back to diesel, freight trains still emit 76% less carbon dioxide than road freight vehicles. The RFG says its members are assuring them that this is a temporary measure and they will keep it under constant review. Across Europe, gas prices are at record highs. The European Commission urges member states to take measures to protect the poor amid energy price hikes. The Commission says member states need to ensure that energy supplies to low-income households are not cut off. NTD's Eddie Aiken has the story.
The European Commission has advised the 27 EU member countries to take measures to help households and businesses endure the impact of high energy prices. EU Energy Commissioner Kadri Simpson says the measures can include paying a lump sum, issuing a voucher, or covering part of the bills.
This may seem a tall order for member states still recovering from the devastation of the pandemic. However, ETS revenues have been steadily increasing, and we call on the member states to use that additional income to address the social impact of the energy price surge where needed.
ETS is the EU's emissions trading system.
In our assessment, member states received an additional €10.8 billion in the first 9 months of 2021 compared to the same period in 2020. There is no limit to how much of this can be used to protect vulnerable households.
Simpson says member countries can also reduce households' energy tax rates or reduce VAT rates, as long as minimum rates are respected.
And finally, to shield the people in the most difficult situation, member states can put in place measures to ensure no one is disconnected from the grid and that bill payments can be temporarily delayed.
The Commission says it also wants to see longer-term measures to prepare the EU for such possible price shocks, including accelerating investment in renewable energy sources and developing energy storage capacity. Simpson insisted the energy price surge was not a result of the bloc's climate policy or due to the cost of renewable energy. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Staying with energy news, Norway will continue to explore for oil and gas in the next 4 years, with most new drilling permits to come in mature areas of the sea. Norway's new centre-left government made the announcement on Wednesday, a day before it formally came to power. A minority coalition of the Labour Party and the Rural Centre Party defeated the Conservative-led government in last month's election. The Labour-led coalition said the Norwegian petroleum industry will be developed, not dismantled, in a joint policy document. Climate change formed a major part of the debate during the campaign for Parliament. The former Labour leader and new Prime Minister, Jonas Gahr Store, has said Labour wants to ensure any transition towards green energy is a gradual one. The oil industry welcomed the new government's plans. Oil and gas are the backbone of Norway's economy, accounting for about 40% of Norway's exports. And now to Bulgaria. Coal miners and energy workers there protested on Wednesday to demand government guarantees for their jobs. This comes amid bids by the European Union to close mines and reduce carbon emissions. The miners say the EU's timeframe for closing the coal industry is too short and argue it shouldn't come at the expense of the bloc's poorest and most carbon-dependent regions. NTD's Ana Rodriguez brings us this report.
Hundreds of coal miners protest in Bulgaria's capital on Wednesday, demanding job protection from the government. The miners rally in response to European Union directives to close mines and reduce carbon emissions. They question the push for renewable energy that provides 15% of the country's power.
Where is the green energy from solar panels? Today, only 2 megawatts of solar panels operate throughout Bulgaria. The Maritsa power plant produces 60% of our energy. Long live Maritsa!
Nearly 50% of the electricity in Bulgaria is produced by coal power plants, with 35% from nuclear. Bulgaria's two largest trade unions say they arranged the protests to defend the country's energy independence.
In short, the demands of the protest are to keep jobs and transform the production so we don't close the Maritsa Istok complex, the thermal power plants and the mines.
Protesters submitted over 100,000 petition signatures to the government, demanding the lifetime of the coal-fired plants to be extended. They also warned of a possible domestic crisis in the coming winter due to high energy prices in the EU.
I hope the government will agree with us, protect us and save our jobs. Otherwise, we are left without work. I am optimistic about our future.
The financial burden of reducing carbon emissions poses a huge challenge to a country with one of the lowest standards of living in the EU. Ana Rodriguez, NTD News.
The Arctic has become a competition field for superpowers and the EU wants a share. The European bloc has limited influence in the region, and the EU is not even a member of the Arctic Council, though 3 of its member states are. A proposal published on Wednesday details a new Arctic strategy and the EU's plans to promote sustainable developments in the region. NTD's Eddie Aiken has the details.
The European Union has published a proposal for the bloc's new Arctic strategy. The EU plans to open an office in Greenland and to use EU funding to promote sustainable development in the Arctic. The proposal says the EU is committed to ensuring that oil, coal and gas stay in the ground, including in Arctic regions, though the bloc still imports oil and gas extracted in the region. The European Commission wants to work with partners towards a legal obligation not to allow oil or gas exploration in the Arctic or adjacent regions. The Arctic has become a competition field for superpowers, from the US, Canada to Russia and China, as shrinking polar ice offers new opportunities for resources and shipping routes. Eddie Aitken, NTD News.
Peat, plentiful in bogs in northern Europe, could be used to make sodium-ion batteries for use in electric vehicles. And scientists at an Estonian university say they will be cheaper than lithium-ion batteries. Here's NTD's Joanne Robson with more on this.
Scientists in Estonia say they found a way to use peat to make sodium-ion batteries cheaply for use in electric vehicles. Sodium-ion batteries are one of the new technologies that battery makers are looking at as they seek alternatives to the dominant lithium-ion model. Scientists at Estonia's Tartu University say using peat reduces the overall cost of the battery because they don't contain relatively costly lithium, cobalt or nickel. And the peat they're using is very cheap, as it's not used for agriculture or fuel, but does yield a good quality carbon powder for batteries. That's according to N. Lust, head of the university's Institute of Chemistry.
In Estonia we have a lot of peat, and in principle we are not using this peat. What can be used was agricultural and other heating purposes, but we are using mainly the peat what is not used usually in Estonia. It is a well decomposed peat, and we are preparing through the 2 synthesis steps very good carbon powder what can be used for these sodium-ion batteries as well as supercapacitors.
The process includes heating decomposed peat to a high temperature in a furnace for 2 to 3 hours. That carbon is used to make components in the batteries. With an increasing move worldwide to renewable energy and electric vehicles, alternatives to lithium batteries like this could be important. Global demand for lithium last year was about 320,000 tonnes and is expected to hit 1 million tonnes by 2025 and 3 million tonnes by the end of the decade.
And we need very cheap devices to store huge quantities of electricity. And on these possibilities is batteries, including the lithium-ion and sodium-ion batteries. But the lithium-ion batteries are very expensive because the price of lithium is 30 or even 50 times more expensive than sodium.
The technology is still in its infancy, and sodium-ion batteries using peat still need to prove they are commercially viable and can be scaled up. But the university expects the government to fund a small-scale factory in Estonia to try out the technology. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
Still to come, 5 people are killed with a bow and arrow in Norway. A Danish citizen who converted to Islam is now in custody. That and more after the break. Norwegian police say a Danish citizen who converted to Islam is suspected of killing 5 people with a bow and arrow and other weapons. The 5 people, 4 women and 1 man, were between 50 and 70 years old. The new Prime Minister is on his first day in office.
And today my first thoughts really go to Kongsberg and those affected there. those who have lost their lives, who are injured, and who are shocked by this horrible incident that has hit this beautiful town.
3 people, including an off-duty police officer, were wounded in the attacks on Wednesday evening in the town of Kongsberg. Police say the suspect is in custody and is believed to have acted alone. Officials say they had been worried about signs of his radicalization and are calling it an act of terror. The Great Brexit brawl headed into its next round on Wednesday when the European Union made concessions to improve trade in Northern Ireland. The EU's top Brexit official called it an alternative model to the Northern Ireland Protocol. The UK, though, is insisting on a further fundamental change. We hear more from NTD's Joanne Robson.
The EU is proposing major changes in the system of customs for Northern Ireland. Its top Brexit official said on Wednesday, under the new rules, goods must still be checked between Britain and the province and meet EU standards. But with changes to the proposed Northern Ireland Protocol, checks on food, plants and animals could be cut by 80% and paperwork for transport companies in half.
We have put a lot of hard work into this package. We explored every possible angle of the protocol and at times went beyond current EU law.
Northern Ireland remained part of the EU's single market when the UK left the bloc last year. Both sides agreed to avoid a hard border in order to safeguard the Good Friday Agreement. But the customs border in the Irish Sea has brought red tape for businesses and has riled Northern Ireland's unionists. A key aspect is medicine.
We have completely turned our rules upside down and inside out to find a solid solution to an outstanding challenge. That involves the EU changing its own rules on medicines. In practice, British wholesalers of medicines will be able to continue supplying Northern Ireland from their current location in Great Britain.
In response, the UK Health Secretary on Thursday welcomed Brussels' moves.
That we've had issues with medicine supply in Northern Ireland, and no one wants to see issues like that. It's not in anyone's interest, whether they're in Northern Ireland or Ireland for that matter.
The government, however, is insisting on a further fundamental change. Brexit Minister Lord Frost said in a speech this week that Brussels must remove the European Court of Justice as the ultimate arbiter of the Brexit deal. Javid echoed Frost.
Looking forward, there should not be a role for the European Court of Justice in anywhere, any part of the UK, and that includes Northern Ireland. I think it's an over-legalistic approach that the court has.
Observers see it as unlikely the EU would lose its supervision over part of its trading market. If the UK government sticks to this demand, it is hard to see room for compromise. The EU and the UK say they will hold several weeks of intensive talks on the latest proposals. Their first meeting is scheduled for Friday in Brussels. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
In other news, the French government will ask Parliament to extend its pandemic state of emergency until the 31st of July next year to deal with the pandemic. That could mean the use of a health pass could be extended.
There is still a non-negligible risk of an epidemic resurgence. The winter is favourable to that type of resurgence. New variants can appear, as we have seen, and the lowering of immunity is not out of the question. So yes, we must stay vigilant until next summer.
The current state of emergency and the requirement for a health pass are due to expire on the 15th of November. The extension would mean the government will keep the power to extend or reinstate restrictions such as the use of a health pass to gain access to venues such as restaurants, bars and cinemas. France has recorded more than 7 million cases of COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic, with nearly 120,000 reported COVID-related deaths. So far, almost 3/4 of the population have received at least one dose of a vaccine. And now to Italy. Protesters take to the streets across Italy to rally against the health pass system. Italians will be required to show their health pass to enter all workplaces starting tomorrow. There are fears that this will impact the labour market. NTD's Joanne Robson brings us the details.
Starting Friday, October the 16th, every worker in Italy must show proof of vaccination or a negative virus test from within 48 hours or show recent recovery from the virus. And it doesn't matter if they are in the private or the public sector. Anyone who fails to present a green pass will be suspended with no pay.
I'm obliged to. In one way or another, they're making you do it, even if you don't want to.
Residents against the measure took to the streets over the weekend and on Monday in cities across Italy. And in Rome, some of the protesters clashed with riot police. On Sunday, police arrested 12 people in relation to the protests, including leaders of a right-wing political party said to be behind the protests. The pass is already required to enter places like restaurants, gyms and museums, or to travel on trains and aeroplanes.
I've just left the restaurant, so it's clear that I have had to have it.
I had to do it for work and for my kids' sport, and that's what I thought about it.
An internal government document estimates that some 15% of private sector employees do not have a green pass, along with around 8% of public sector workers. Fears are growing that the Green Pass measure will cause staff shortages and disruptions for firms and public services. Some politicians, trade unions and businesses say the mandatory Green Pass risks backfiring. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
Now to Germany. Authorities said on Wednesday that the number of migrants arriving in the country via Poland and Belarus has gone up sharply in recent months. That's as Germany accuses the Belarus government of encouraging people to cross into the EU from its territory in a form of hybrid war. German federal police say over 4,000 people illegally crossed the border from Poland this year. Almost half of them arrived this month alone. Most of the migrants come from Iraq, Syria, Yemen and Iran. A local official called the situation in the reception centres not dramatic, but tough. Thousands of migrants came via tourist visas to Belarus and then crossed into Poland, Lithuania and Latvia. The EU blames Belarus for orchestrating the flow to put pressure on the bloc in retaliation for sanctions it had slapped on Minsk. To Paris now, where for months there's been growing discontent among Parisians about the run-down state of their city. Residents say the streets are littered with rubbish and graffiti, and historic street furniture is in need of repair. NTD's France correspondent David Vevez has more from Paris.
For several months, the hashtag Saccage Paris, meaning trashed Paris, has been trending on Twitter. Parisians are posting pictures of graffiti, trash or broken street furniture. Many say the city's socialist leadership is to blame. Last weekend, a protest in front of the Paris town hall denounced the trashing of the capital.
We want to know why the Paris of our parents and grandparents is disappearing. We want to know why the Paris we've known as children is disappearing, and why we live in a disfigured city that has no soul.
According to a survey from the French Institute of Public Opinion, 84% of Parisians think their city is dirty and 40% find it very dirty. The movement is about preventing the city's heritage from falling into disrepair or being destroyed. Marina Yaloyan created an association called Save Our Paris 6 months ago. The group now has 22,000 members. The main issue for her is the gradual destruction of old street furniture.
And people disagree, because we have amazing heritage that needs to be preserved, that the entire world is jealous of. And what we see it completely, the complete destruction, and we don't see it well preserved, we don't see it clean.
You don't need to go far from City Hall to find telling examples.
In Paris, we have beautiful 18th century benches. And see what we got here? This bench seems to come out of a bunker from old communist Russia. We encourage people to sue the city's mayor. It seems that's the only way to stop this folly.
Another example is on the island of St. Louis in the Seine River. These stones are covered with graffiti. Instead of cleaning it, the mayor chose to paint the 1,000-year-old stones grey. Mayor Anne Hidalgo, a member of the Socialist Party, says far-right extremists are behind the protests, but there's no clear evidence to support that claim. She did admit back in April that the city's cleaning teams were short-staffed due to the pandemic. Meanwhile, many new buildings are being constructed in Paris as city officials prepare for the 2024 Olympic Games, which is set to take place in the French capital. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
And now Bosnia, where a man built a house able to rotate on its foundation. He wanted to please his wife's wish to change the view from her bedroom. The builder reused electric motors and wheels of an old military transport vehicle to spin their new home. NTD's John Robson brings us the story.
An unusual family home in Srbac, a small town in northern Bosnia. The house, designed and built by 72-year-old Vojin Kusic, can fully rotate on its foundation.
When I was building our normal house, my wife and I talked about it, and she said she wanted our bedroom to face the sun so that sun rays would wake her up, and I accepted that.
His wife then wished for more diversified views, so he decided to build her a rotating house that she can spin as she pleases. She can watch the rising sun in one moment and passers-by the next.
I did everything by myself. I've been doing this for 6 years. Every day I did a little bit, and I was in no hurry.
The house can make a full circle in 24 hours at its slowest speed. A full turn takes only 22 seconds at its fastest speed. Joanne Robson, NTD News.
That's the news for today. Have a good evening. Thank you for watching our daily news show on YouTube. You can also watch our other programming on channel 190 on Sky TV or on Freeview via channel box on channel 271. In the meantime though, please give this video a like and hit subscribe to our channel. Have a good day.